Kill the power before that lift drops. Caleb Turner shouted over the rain as he ran toward the broken windows of the abandoned Hartwell Machine Works. A firefighter caught his shoulder before he reached the loading bay. Stay behind the line. Caleb pointed through the darkness. That steel platform is slipping. If it falls, whatever's underneath it won't survive. At 46, Caleb looked like exactly what he was. A tired mobile mechanic in a patched canvas jacket, with grease beneath his nails and overdue notices folded inside his truck. He had come to the old factory outside Millbrook, Pennsylvania, only because the county tow operator's engine had stalled near the emergency scene. Then he heard the dog. One deep bark rose from somewhere beneath the collapsed service floor, followed by two shorter ones. Caleb froze. Near the entrance, a police officer knelt beside an empty K-9 transport crate, rain streaming from his uniform cap. "Rex," the officer called. The German shepherd answered from below, his bark strained but controlled. A patrol vehicle had crashed through a weakened loading door during a pursuit, leaving Rex trapped inside the factory after his handler was pulled from the wreck. Rescue crews had found the dog beneath an old hydraulic vehicle lift, but twisted steel and unstable concrete blocked every direct route. Caleb studied the tilted platform through the open bay. One corner rested against a fractured support beam. The opposite side hung several inches lower, trembling each time wind pushed rain through the roof. "How long has he been under there?" Caleb asked. The officer looked up. "Almost an hour. The lift still has pressure in it. The power is disconnected. That doesn't mean the cylinders are empty." Caleb stepped closer to the barricade. The incident commander, Chief Nolan Price, moved between him and the building. "We have structural specialists coming from Pittsburgh. Until then, nobody enters." "I'm not asking to enter." Caleb nodded toward the lift. "That model stores pressure in two side cylinders. If one seal is failing, the table will settle unevenly." A metallic groan rolled through the factory. Rex barked once. Caleb's chest tightened. Years earlier, he had serviced the same type of industrial lift at his own garage. He knew the sound of a bypass valve struggling to hold. He also knew what came after it stopped struggling. Caleb picked up a short tire iron from beside the disabled tow truck and struck the steel guardrail 3 times, evenly spaced. From beneath the floor came 3 answering barks. The handler stood. "He's trained to respond to location signals." Caleb struck twice, paused, then struck once. Rex answered with the same pattern. The dog was conscious, alert, and listening. "He can help us track where he is while we work," Caleb said. Chief Price glanced toward the sagging roof. "Work from outside only." Caleb nodded and followed the exposed hydraulic lines along the loading bay wall. Rust covered most of the fittings, but one hose shivered beneath a layer of rainwater. A dark thread of oil ran from its coupling and disappeared through a crack in the concrete. He crouched without touching it. The leak was old around the edges, fresh at the center. "The pressure is bleeding off," he said. "How much time?" the handler asked. Caleb watched another drop form, fall, and vanish into the darkness below. Not enough to wait for a crew from Pittsburgh. He struck the guardrail again. Rex answered immediately, but this time his final bark ended beneath a sharp steel snap. The lift shifted lower, and Caleb knew the dog was no longer merely trapped. The machine above him had begun to descend. The handler flinched at the sound of the steel snapping. "Rex!" A single bark answered from below, weaker but steady. Chief Price raised one hand, stopping 2 firefighters who had started toward the loading bay. "Nobody crosses that threshold. The slab is moving." Caleb kept his eyes on the leaking hose. "If the pressure drops all at once, the platform will settle another 6 inches. And if we send someone in, the roof may come with it," Price replied. "That's why we work the system from out here." Caleb pointed to the rusted lines running along the exterior wall. "The lift has a manual isolation valve somewhere before those hoses enter the building. Close the wrong side and we trap pressure in the failing cylinder. Close the right side and we slow the descent." Price studied him. "You certain?" Certain enough to know guessing will kill the dog. The handler stepped closer. His name is Rex. He's 6 years old. Search certified. Caleb nodded, then struck the guardrail twice with the tire iron. Rex answered twice. The rhythm gave Caleb more than location. The sound came from slightly left of the lift center, near the lower service channel. He crouched beside the wall and traced the pipes through mud and weeds until he found a corroded junction box. Its cover had been welded shut years earlier. A firefighter handed him a flashlight. Caleb wiped away grime, revealing 2 faded arrows stamped into the metal. One line fed the main cylinder. The other returned fluid to a buried reservoir. "We need the shutoff upstream," he said. "Not here." Price shook his head. "The structural engineer is 25 minutes out. Rex may have 10. Another groan rolled through the building. The handler closed his eyes briefly. Caleb moved along the wall, tapping each exposed pipe with a wrench. Most answered with a dull ring. One gave a deeper, liquid-filled note. Rex barked sharply when Caleb struck it. He tried the next pipe. Silence. Then the first again. Rex responded. "He's hearing pressure move through that line," Caleb said. Price looked toward the handler. "Can he distinguish signals?" "He can identify sound sources and respond to directed searches." Caleb tapped the pipe once, then moved 6 feet farther down and tapped again. Rex answered only at the first point. Caleb scraped mud away and uncovered a square steel plate near the foundation. Beneath it sat a recessed valve wheel, nearly hidden by rust. "Found it!" Price ordered a firefighter to brace the plate while Caleb tested the wheel. It would not move. He fitted the tire iron through the spokes and applied steady pressure. The metal groaned. "Easy," Price warned. Caleb stopped. A fine crack had opened along the foundation beside them. Rainwater disappeared into it. The ground under the wall was shifting. Price pulled him back. "That's enough. We wait." Caleb looked at the valve, then toward the darkness where Rex remained trapped. He struck the pipe once. Rex answered, but the bark ended in a cough. Caleb lowered the tire iron. "The system is losing pressure faster now," he said. "Waiting is not the safe choice anymore." Caleb studied the crack beside the buried valve, then shifted his flashlight along the exterior pipes. The foundation was unsafe, but the hydraulic system extended beyond the damaged wall. "There has to be another access point," he said. Chief Price kept one hand raised toward the firefighters. "Find it without crossing the line." Caleb moved toward the rear loading yard, where weeds covered old service trenches. He tapped each exposed pipe with the tire iron, listening for the difference between empty steel and trapped fluid. Rex answered only when Caleb struck the line carrying pressure toward the lift. The dog's response grew sharper near a rusted inspection cover half buried beneath gravel. Caleb knelt and cleared it with his gloved hands. For bolts held the cover down. 2 snapped loose. The others were fused with corrosion. He poured penetrating oil from his truck kit onto the threads, waited several seconds, then worked them back and forth instead of forcing them. The handler watched from behind the barricade. "You've done this kind of work before." Caleb did not answer. He loosened the final bolt and lifted the cover, revealing 2 narrow hydraulic lines and a small bypass valve beneath the yard. One fitting was wet with fresh oil. Around it, darker stains had soaked deep into the gravel. "This leak started long before tonight," Caleb said. He wrapped a clean rag around the line and watched where the oil spread first. The upper coupling remained dry. The lower return fitting darkened immediately. He placed a wrench on the bypass stem and turned it less than an inch. From inside the factory came a low mechanical shudder. Rex barked twice, then stopped. Caleb froze and returned the stem to its original position. The dog barked once. "He felt the pressure shift," the handler said. "Or heard it through the steel," Caleb replied. Either way, Rex was giving them information no gauge outside could provide. Caleb tapped the supply pipe once, then touched the valve again without turning it. Rex answered from farther left beneath the platform. The sound suggested he had moved several feet away from the lowest edge. "He's not pinned," Caleb said. He can still reposition. Chief Price stepped closer. Can you stabilize the lift? Not with this valve alone. But I can identify which circuit is failing. Caleb fitted a small pressure gauge from his service truck onto the test port. The needle climbed, trembled, then dropped in uneven pulses. He opened the bypass fraction. Rex barked rapidly. Caleb closed it. The gauge steadied. Main cylinder is holding. The return circuit is bleeding through a damaged valve. A firefighter asked, "Can we isolate it?" Caleb looked toward a second line disappearing beneath the rear wall. "Only if we find the remote lockout." Rain washed mud from the concrete, exposing a faded yellow stripe leading toward an old utility shed. Caleb followed it with his flashlight. Rex barked once from below, as if urging him onward. The shed door was chained, but behind its broken window Caleb saw a red manual control wheel mounted on the wall. He pointed. "That's our next chance." Caleb reached the utility shed and tested the chain with both hands. The lock was too heavy to cut with anything in his truck, and the broken window was too narrow to reach the control wheel safely. Chief Price studied the sagging roofline as another gust pushed rain through the shattered factory windows. "We are losing the foundation on the north side," he said. "If that wall shifts, everyone clears the yard." The handler struck the guardrail once. Rex answered from below, but the bark came farther toward the rear service channel. Caleb looked at the shed, then at the exposed yellow stripe in the mud. "The control line runs under this slab. There may be a maintenance conduit between the shed and the lift." A firefighter found an old drainage opening near the wall, barely 2 feet high and half blocked by debris. Cold air moved through it from beneath the factory. Price shook his head immediately. "No one crawls inside that." Caleb crouched and shone his light into the opening. The passage was narrow, but it stayed outside the main collapse zone for several yards before turning beneath the loading floor. "I don't need to go all the way in," he said. "If the conduit is still open, we can feed a cable through and turn the remote wheel from here. Or disturb the slab and bring the wall down," Price replied. Rainwater streamed into the drainage mouth, carrying loose gravel with it. Caleb knew the safer personal choice was to step back and let trained rescuers wait for engineers. He also knew the machine would not wait with them. "Give me one attempt from outside," he said. "No entry past the first support joint. If the meter moves or the wall cracks again, I stop." The handler stepped beside Price. Rex is trained to move toward a repeated knock and hold position on command. If Caleb can give him a route, I can keep him clear of the lift. Price looked between them, then ordered firefighters to shore the drainage entrance with cribbing and monitor the wall. Caleb removed a flexible retrieval cable from his service truck, taped a small wrench to the end, and fed it into the conduit. It snagged almost immediately. He withdrew it, bent the tip, and tried again. From below came one bark, then 2 quick scratches against metal. Caleb paused. "He's near the service channel." The handler gave Rex a stay command through the opening. The dog answered once. Caleb advanced the cable another foot. It struck something hollow. He tapped the line twice with the tire iron. Rex barked twice from directly beyond the obstruction. "There's an access hatch between him and the lift," Caleb said. The dog's signal had revealed a narrow route no one had seen on the damaged plans. Price nodded toward the cable. "Find the wheel." Caleb pushed again until the wrench caught metal deep beneath the shed. He twisted gently. The cable tightened, and somewhere underground a valve groaned. Then the north wall dropped half an inch, sending everyone backward as concrete dust burst from the foundation. Price raised his arm. "Stop. We pull out now." Caleb released the cable, but Rex barked 3 times from the hidden channel. Clear, urgent, and closer than before. Chief Price ordered everyone behind the marked line while firefighters checked the shifted wall. Caleb remained beside the drainage opening, the retrieval cable slack in his hands. Rex's 3 barks had come from the service channel, not beneath the lowest edge of the lift. The dog had moved farther than Caleb believed possible. "He found the hatch," the handler said. Caleb looked at the narrow route hidden beneath the slab. Until that moment, Every plan had depended on raising the steel platform directly. But Rex was no longer waiting beneath it. He was searching for another way out. Caleb struck the conduit twice, paused, then struck once. Rex answered in the same pattern from deeper inside the channel. "Can you command him backward?" Caleb asked. The handler knelt near the opening and gave a retreat signal, followed by a stay command. Scratching echoed through the metal passage. Rex barked once, then again from several feet closer. Chief Price studied the wall monitor. "Movement has stopped, but nobody enters the structure." "We don't need to," Caleb said. He pointed toward the maintenance hatch Rex had revealed. "If we open the remote lockout enough to release pressure, the lift may settle instead of dropping. Then Rex can back through the channel toward US. May? Price asked. The alternative is lifting thousands of pounds beneath a failing roof. Caleb repositioned the cable and fed it along the conduit while firefighters built a protected route from the drainage mouth to the yard. The wrench caught the buried control wheel again. This time Caleb turned it only a fraction. A deep shudder traveled through the pipes. Rex barked rapidly. Caleb stopped. The handler repeated the retreat command. Scratching moved closer. "He's backing away from the platform," the handler said. Caleb turned the wheel another inch. The pressure gauge near the inspection cover dropped slowly instead of collapsing. Inside the factory, the tilted lift settled with a long metallic groan, but did not fall. Rex barked twice from the channel entrance. Caleb finally understood the dog's earlier responses. Rex had not merely been marking his position. He had been moving whenever the hydraulic pressure changed, showing them which adjustments opened space and which closed it. "He's guiding us through the system," Caleb said. Price nodded toward the cable. "Keep it controlled." Caleb opened the bypass in measured increments while the handler called Rex backward. A dark shape appeared behind the debris inside the drainage passage. Two wet ears emerged first, then the shepherd's face, streaked with grime. Rex tried to crawl forward, but a bent section of grating blocked his shoulders. He gave one frustrated bark and retreated before it shifted. Caleb examined the angle. "We can reach him now," a firefighter said. "Not yet," Caleb replied. "That grate is carrying part of the slab. Pull it wrong, and the channel closes." Rex pressed his nose through the gap and looked directly at Caleb. The rescue had changed. They no longer needed to lift the machine above him. They needed to build a safe path through the route he had found. The rain had eased to a steady hiss when Chief Price ordered the yard lights repositioned around the drainage opening. Rex remained behind the bent grating, close enough to see but still beyond reach. Caleb studied the old inspection cover and the stained fittings beneath it. Something about the failure bothered him. The return valve had not simply worn out tonight. Its corrosion was layered, and the oil-darkened gravel showed years of seepage. This system was failing long before the factory closed, Caleb said. Price looked toward him. "You know that from the stains?" "From the stains, the uneven pressure, and that bypass assembly. Somebody kept this lift operating after it should have been shut down." The handler glanced at Rex. "Does that help us get him out?" "Maybe. If the original maintenance layout still exists, there may be a secondary release farther down the return circuit." Price radioed an officer to check archived building records while Caleb examined a metal inspection tag half hidden beneath rust. He wiped it clean and stopped. Scratched into the plate were service initials and a date from 7 years earlier. His own initials. For several seconds he said nothing. "You worked here?" Price asked. Caleb nodded. "My garage had the maintenance contract. I flagged this lift after the cylinders started settling unevenly." He remembered the argument with the plant manager, the demand to sign an approval he could not justify, and the contract that disappeared after he refused. Within months, losing that account had helped bury his small shop in debt. Price's expression hardened, but Caleb shook his head. "Do not make him into a villain. He had 40 people on payroll and orders already late. Shutting the lift meant stopping part of production. He thought he was buying time. And you? I thought the machine was telling us time was already gone." An officer returned with a scanned maintenance summary on a tablet. Several pages were missing, but one notation showed a temporary auxiliary bypass installed after Caleb's final inspection. The modification had been approved by another contractor, then revised twice before the plant closed. Caleb enlarged the faded diagram. A narrow control line ran from the rear utility shed to the same return circuit beneath the service channel. "That is why the wheel reacted," he said. "It is not the main lockout. It is an auxiliary bleed." Price looked toward the shed. Meaning we may be able to lower the trapped pressure gradually without touching the grate. Caleb's relief lasted only a moment. The diagram also carried a handwritten warning beside the auxiliary stem. Unstable under reverse load. The lift was now tilted in exactly that condition. Rex scratched twice against the grating. Caleb tapped the conduit in reply, then looked at Price. "We have a better path, but less margin than I thought." Price nodded. "Then nobody improvises." Caleb fed the retrieval cable back toward the buried wheel while firefighters reinforced the drainage mouth. As the wrench caught the stem, a faint vibration traveled through the cable into his hand. Rex rose behind the grate, ears forward. Caleb had finally found the modification that explained the lift's strange behavior, and the same shortcut that had kept the factory running years ago might now be the only mechanism capable of freeing the dog. The second vibration became a grinding tremor beneath the yard. Firefighters added cribbing around the drainage mouth while Caleb worked the bypass wheel in careful increments, trying to widen the channel without shifting the slab. Rex stayed behind the bent grating, panting hard, his coat soaked with rainwater running through the passage. The handler gave a retreat command, but the shepherd had nowhere left to go. Caleb turned the remote wheel another fraction. The pressure gauge dropped smoothly, then snapped back. A metallic crack sounded beneath the shed. The retrieval cable went loose in Caleb's hands. "The auxiliary stem broke," he said. He pulled the cable out. The small wrench was still attached, but a jagged piece of valve metal clung to it. Without the auxiliary control, they could no longer bleed pressure from outside. Chief Price checked the wall monitors. The rear sensor had moved again. "Everyone back. The channel is no longer stable." "We can reach the main line through the inspection cover," Caleb said. "Not before the slab shifts," Price replied. "We have rescuers standing over a collapse zone. I will not lose them too." The handler remained on his knees near the entrance. "Rex, stay." The dog answered with a strained bark. Caleb looked through the opening and saw only Rex's muzzle beyond the grating. The shepherd's breathing had grown shallow, and muddy water was rising around his paws. For hours, every adjustment had created another chance. Now the one mechanism Caleb understood had failed in his hands. Firefighters withdrew tools and moved behind the safety line. Price placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "You gave us more time than we had, but we pull out now." Caleb did not argue. He walked toward his service truck, hearing the rain strike its metal roof. The old maintenance report sat open on a patrol car nearby, proof that he had been right 7 years ago. It meant nothing while Rex remained trapped beneath the consequences. Caleb gripped the truck door with his stiff hand. He had lost his garage because he refused to call unsafe equipment safe. Tonight, despite all that knowledge, he had still failed to free the dog beneath it. Behind him, the handler struck the guardrail twice, paused, then, once. Silence followed. Caleb closed his eyes. Then 3 barks rose from the drainage channel in the exact answering pattern Rex had used from the beginning. Weak but deliberate. Caleb turned. The dog barked again, followed by 2 scratches against the grating. Not panic. A signal. Caleb crossed back to the inspection cover and stared at the 2 hydraulic lines. The broken auxiliary valve had ended the outside plan, but the main return line still ran within reach beneath the gravel. "He's telling us the passage is still open," Caleb said. Price shook his head. "That does not make the structure safe." "No, but it means we have one controlled option left." Caleb pointed to the exposed return fitting. "We relieve pressure here by hand, from behind the barricade. No one enters. If the gauge jumps, we stop." Rex answered the familiar pattern once more. Caleb picked up his wrench, no longer believing he could guarantee the rescue, only knowing he could not abandon the dog while the dog was still guiding them. Chief Price studied the exposed return fitting, then ordered the firefighters to extend the barricade and secure Caleb with a safety line. "You stay outside the collapse zone," he said. "One unstable reading and we stop." Caleb fitted a pressure-rated hose from his truck kit to the test port and routed it into a sealed recovery drum. Opening the line too quickly could drop the platform onto the channel, so he loosened the fitting by fractions while watching the gauge. Rex answered each tap from beneath the grating. The first release produced a thin stream of dark hydraulic oil. The needle fell 2 pounds. Rex scratched once and shifted forward. Caleb stopped. He gained space. The handler repeated the crawl command. Rex lowered himself and pushed one shoulder beneath the bent grating, but the steel pressed against his harness. Caleb tapped twice. The shepherd backed away. "The pressure change is moving the platform just enough to alter the load on that grate," Caleb said. "He's telling us when it opens." He released another measured amount. The slab groaned, but the wall sensors held. Rex barked rapidly, then began crawling before the handler gave the command. His training and the repeated pressure changes had taught him which sound meant the gap was widening. Caleb closed the fitting the moment Rex's chest cleared the steel. Firefighters reached through the protected entrance, removed the snagged harness strap, and guided him forward without pulling the grating. Rex dragged himself through the muddy channel and collapsed just beyond the cribbing. His handler crossed the safe line only after Price approved it, dropping beside him as paramedics wrapped the shepherd in blankets. Rex lifted his head, found Caleb through the rain, and thumped his tail once against the ground. An officer arrived carrying the archived maintenance records. The city file contained Caleb's original photographs, pressure readings, and written demand that the lift be shut down. Beside them was a later approval signed by factory management authorizing temporary operation after Caleb's contract had been canceled. The stains around the inspection tag, the failing return valve, and the unequal cylinder pressure matched every warning he had documented 7 years earlier. Price looked at Caleb. "You didn't lose that garage because your work was bad." Caleb watched Rex breathing beneath the blanket. "Knowing that now doesn't give those years back." "No," Price said. "But the official report will tell the truth. The rescue had proven more than the old paperwork could." Caleb's knowledge had been accurate, his refusal had been responsible, and Rex's responses had confirmed the system's movement when no instrument could show what was happening underground. The handler approached once the veterinarian cleared Rex for transport. "He kept answering you," he said. Caleb knelt at a safe distance. Rex reached forward and pressed his wet muzzle into Caleb's grease-stained palm. Around them, the factory remained unstable and the investigation had only begun. But the dog no one could reach was finally in the open, and the man everyone had dismissed was no longer invisible. For 3 days, Rex remained under veterinary observation while his handler stayed nearby. The shepherd had bruising, dehydration, and a strained shoulder, but no lasting injury. Caleb visited once, standing outside the recovery room until Rex lifted his head and recognized him. The dog gave a quiet bark in the same pattern they had used beneath the factory. Caleb tapped twice on the doorframe, paused, then once. Rex's tail moved across the blanket. The city investigation confirmed what the rescue had already exposed. Caleb's report from 7 years earlier had accurately identified the failing return circuit, cracked seals, and uneven platform movement. Factory management had postponed replacement to avoid stopping production, then blamed Caleb when he refused to approve the lift. The official findings cleared his professional record and required abandoned municipal properties to undergo updated equipment inspections before emergency crews entered them. Caleb did not celebrate the names printed in the report. He thought about Rex beneath the steel and how easily an ignored warning could become someone else's trap. Chief Price asked Caleb to inspect several pieces of aging city equipment under a temporary contract. The offer came with ordinary paperwork, certification requirements, and liability rules. It was not a reward for courage. It was paid work based on demonstrated skill. Caleb accepted, completed the required training, and spent the next 2 months checking hydraulic lifts, tow equipment, and maintenance bays across the county. Some machines passed. Others were taken out of service before anyone could be hurt. The steady work allowed him to clear the most urgent debts and rent a narrow garage behind an old service station in Millbrook. The building needed paint, the roof leaked near the rear wall, and the office contained only a metal desk and 2 chairs. Caleb repaired it piece by piece. He painted a simple sign above the door: Turner Mobile Repair and Safety Inspection. No grand reopening followed. Customers came slowly, tow operators, small contractors, and city crews who had read the investigation report. Caleb treated each machine the same way he had treated the failing lift, without shortcuts and without signing his name to anything he could not defend. One cold morning, a patrol vehicle pulled into the gravel lot. Rex sat upright in the rear compartment, heeled and cleared for duty. His handler opened the door, and the German Shepherd jumped down carefully. Caleb wiped his hands on a shop rag and stepped outside. Rex crossed the yard at once, but instead of rushing, he stopped beside Caleb's left leg, exactly where a working dog would wait for direction. Caleb smiled and lowered his hand. The shepherd pressed his muzzle into the grease-stained palm, then looked toward the open garage. "He remembers every signal," the handler said. Caleb tapped a wrench twice against the workbench, paused, then struck once. Rex answered with 3 strong barks that echoed through the bright shop. The handler laughed. "I think that means he approves." Caleb looked around at the repaired tools, the inspection forms, and the small heater glowing near the wall. Months earlier, he had believed losing his garage proved that honesty had cost him everything. Now he understood that the skill and integrity others had dismissed were the very things that had brought him back. Rex had survived because Caleb refused to ignore the machine's warning, and Caleb had been restored because the dog kept answering when everyone else believed the distance between them was impossible. At sunrise, the patrol vehicle pulled away, but Rex kept his head turned toward the garage until the road curved out of sight. Caleb stood beneath the new sign as morning light spread across the wet pavement, then opened the bay door fully and returned to work.